Sup, boys? It's been a minute. I actually have been working on this video for a long time. It feels like I've been working on it forever, but I do think that I actually have some conclusion to the question that I asked myself so long ago. Elemental Mastery versus Attack, which one should you be building? Well, the answer's kind of been covered quite extensively across YouTube for quite a while. I have seen a lot of people just say on like Reddit and stuff like, hey, just Attack is gonna end up yielding you a lot better results. I've seen tons of videos recommended to me that Elemental Mastery is a trap. You shouldn't build it on this person, that person, Venti, official. Just don't build Elemental Mastery. Look, after all the research that I've been doing for the last 7 videos in this series, I'm here to say, yeah. All right, so before we get started into the meat and potatoes of this video, I have self-imposed a challenge to hit 50,000 subs before my birthday, which is in April, and it is officially February 9th as of this recording, so I don't know if I'm gonna make that, but we're gonna sit here and try. If you're not subbed and you want to sub and you want to help me and you want to make me feel good, if you want to let the beard know how much you love me, just hit the sub button. So first and foremost, I don't actually think Elemental Mastery is a trap whatsoever. I actually think that Attack is just a lot easier to get, which ends up making it feel like the results are a lot better. And it just feels like it's the easy gain for the easy results. It's easy gain, easy win, right? I think that Elemental Mastery is very valid in terms of you should not forget about it, because you could end up leaving damage on the table just because you already are doing loads of damage when you build Attack, and Elemental Mastery literally just supplements that damage. Essentially, there are 7 different questions that I'm essentially trying to find the answers for across all of these videos that I've done in this series thus far. As a quick recap for all of those questions, what is Attack and what is Elemental Mastery? Well, Attack is basically a stat that influences literally all of the damage that you do in this game to some extent, except for a certain set of reactions that come from Elemental Infusion, which is where Elemental Mastery comes into play, as it is what induces the damage that comes out of those reactions. So when you have a talent like a bow shot or a charged attack or a elemental skill or an elemental burst, all of that stuff scales off of your attack. When you have a reaction that occurs because you combined electro and cryo into superconduct, that is going to actually scale off of Elemental Mastery. Who actually benefits from Attack and who actually benefits from Elemental Mastery? Well, anyone who ends up applying an aura element or deals physical damage is going to benefit the most from any kind of attack gains, and characters who also trigger amplified reactions are also going to see big numbers because of their attack, versus Elemental Mastery is used for the characters who are triggering specific reactions outside of amplified reactions, and sometimes also in amplified reactions as well. But typically, if they are the trigger element, then they are going to need the Elemental Mastery. How do you get Attack and how do you get Elemental Mastery? The same answer for both. Leveling up your character and your weapons is going to basically be the main source of a ton of your Attack and Elemental Mastery, but artifacts probably play a greater role in that, because you're going to get tons of all of this inside of your artifacts. It's basically the main reason we're talking about this. Where should you end up putting your Attack? Because of the nature of the reactions, everyone but Catalyst users are pretty easy choices when it comes to Attack. Catalyst users are kind of unique. They're also kind of unique when it comes to Elemental Mastery, because Elemental Mastery needs to be the characters who are triggering the reactions, and Catalyst users aren't necessarily always the ones triggering it. I think Catalyst users can go both ways. There are situations where a Catalyst user could be the aura or could be the trigger. If you think about Klee or Mona, you might end up seeing them do a lot of melt or vaporize respectively. And because they are doing those and triggering those reactions, they need to end up being the ones that actually have extra Elemental Mastery on top of their attack. They kind of need both. But in the case of, let's say, Barbara, she's probably not going to be the character on your team that is actually triggering reactions, although she could be if you built her as a DPS. Lisa also may be in that category for you as well. If she's not the one that is triggering the reactions, then they just need to have Attack placed on them, not Elemental Mastery. If you are triggering reactions, the Catalyst needs the Elemental Mastery. If you're just applying auras with them, they only need attack. Why should you be actually adding in attack or elemental mastery? Well, like I said earlier, every single thing actually scales off of attack in this game, and tons of your damage is going to be derived from your attack. If you don't build attack, you aren't going to have a good time generally with this game. But on the flip side of that, why should you build elemental mastery? Because once you get so far on attack, there are diminished returns where as you're building up more and more attack, you're going to see less and less gains than what you would have normally expected. Elemental mastery is kind of what fills that gap, in my opinion. You end up having reactions just from having different elements on your team that can apply elements to enemies in order to do extra reactions. And reactions in that sense are free. Just from you using elemental skills and elemental bursts with each other ends up performing reactions whether you like it or not. And if you build elemental mastery into at least one member of your team, if you do it the correct way, you'll end up getting a lot more damage out of your team rather than if you would have pumped that extra character full of attack instead. Now, the last question that we need to answer is, when should you build attack and when should you build elemental mastery? That's what this video is for. So as just a quick, I don't want to go down this huge rabbit hole, but this guy's already been talking for like 5 minutes and I don't know if I want to even continue watching this video. The quick TLDR of this is, in most cases, if you want high raw damage numbers like white attack or like we had Ganyu with her bow shot, if you want just high raw numbers, attack is going to easily be the best stat to build. It makes the most sense there. But if your team is going to start focusing more on reactions, if you have a team that, the main goal is to do as much overload damage as possible, or if it's going to be combining melt damage with superconduct, I don't know, whatever you're trying to do with your team. If you're trying to go for more reaction-based damage, then elemental mastery definitely needs to be looked at. If it's specifically transformative reactions, you can forget about attack altogether. Just build elemental mastery as high as you want because the reactions are going to end up being the main carry of your damage. I don't think that's necessarily responsible, but do what you want to do. If you are specifically going for reaction-based damage like vaporize or melt, then this is where I'm going to basically just take a deep dive look into those calculations and figure out how to maximize that damage. Now, if you don't want to watch past that, that's fine. With that being said, this makes amplified reactions the main target of these calculations. Because transformative reactions don't take into account attack at any point in their damage, you could just forget about attack. But amplified reactions take the base damage from your attack or your skill that you have just applied to an enemy, considering their level and their resistance and all that stuff, and then it applies extra bonus modifiers on top of that. So to get a deeper understanding of this, where I first started was, what's the maximum amount of attack you can actually get? I ended up going onto a website that's GenshinImpactCalculator.com. This thing is very, very extensive. It basically uses all of the formulas and everything that you will find on the wiki to end up calculating its damage, and it gets really, really close to the in-game stuff. And I actually took a lot of the formulas and stuff from here, and I went back and reapplied them to a lot of the pages in my spreadsheet so that hopefully things are a little bit more streamlined and hopefully they're more accurate than they were before, because there was a little bit of a tolerance in the final calculation that you would get. Anyways, this website was beautiful in the sense that I could just go on here and just play around with all kinds of different numbers and figure out exactly what the highest amount of attack possible that I could get onto a character. Now, I used Ganyu as a baseline because she does have the highest base attack in the game. I literally just pumped her full of attack stats, attack percents, everything that I could find, and I got roughly 5,000 attack. Now, I'm not trying to see what the theoretical highest damage output is possible. I just wanted to see, based on weapon and artifacts and team composition, what is the highest base attack that I'm probably going to be able to get. And with that, I got 5,000. Then I turned around and I did the exact same thing for Elemental Mastery. I ended up using Lisa for that. Because Lisa actually has Elemental Mastery as her Ascension stat, I ended up using that so that she could end up getting probably the most Elemental Mastery that I would be able to get. And with that, I got right around 1,200. So if we actually take that and we go into our attack versus elemental mastery spreadsheet here, we could actually just type in some stuff. We're actually just going to give this a whole bunch of generic numbers. We are going to start calculating at level 90, and we're going to say that everything is pretty much flat from there. So 5,000 attack was about the highest that I could get. Elemental mastery, of course, being 0, because we can't get any elemental mastery if we are pouring literally our weapon, our artifacts, everything we can into attack. There's not any room for a lot of elemental mastery to be possible. I know substats and stuff like that are going to end up, making or break that, but in theory, highest possible attack that I could get, 0 elemental mastery, damage bonus of 0%, skill multiplier just 100%, just whatever flat attack that we have, just apply that as our skill. A good example of this would be Diluc's charged attack at level 2 is exactly 100%, just to kind of give us a baseline of what we're looking at. Both ourselves and the enemy is going to be at level 90, enemy resistance of 10%, and critical stats are just base, meaning we didn't put any effort into getting any extra crit rate or crit damage. So what that ends up giving us is, at the most extreme, if we only built attack, we had 6,750 on a critical melt, which is strong, or vaporize, which is strong. Then let's turn around and let's do the opposite. So we have 0. Oh, by the way, before I hit enter, if you'll check out overload, shattered, electrocharge, swirl, and superconduct, just kind of keep those in your mind for a second. And we type in the 1200 here. You can see, holy moly, this goes insanely high, 7,875. That's a ton of overload damage. Remember that overload, all of these transformative reactions don't take into account attack. They only do elemental mastery, our level, and our enemy's resistance, all that good stuff. So you don't actually have to worry too much about your attack. Now you'll notice it's going to be impossible to actually have 0 attack in game. About the lowest that you could get, Barbara actually has the lowest base attack in the game, and even if you pair her with a crappy weapon, you're going to be somewhere around like the 170-ish mark. So if we type in 170, you can see we should expect about some puny numbers down here. So this kind of gives us an idea of the two extremes, what we should be expecting. At full elemental mastery, if we go all in on full elemental mastery, overload is going to do a ton of damage. Electrocharged, gonna do a ton of damage. Remember, electrocharged actually ticks twice before it goes away, so you end up getting more damage out of electrocharge than you do overload altogether. Shattered gonna be doing a ton of extra damage. Swirl, between transferal and stuff like that, yeah, you could probably hit some really high numbers. Superconduct is going to be lowering, defense and stuff like that. So yeah, it could pay off, right? It's actually pretty good. But our amplified reactions take a huge hit, and it kind of ends up sucking because we don't have any attack. Now, if you are actually interested, I did actually use my brain a little bit. So I basically went through and I wrote a bunch of code that will pretty much do all these calculations for me. If you've been watching me for a while, it's basically just a damage calculator program that I wrote. Anyways, I got that to actually spit out a ton of different scenarios for me. They're all under this raw numbers attack versus elemental mastery sheet. It basically goes all the way up to 5,000 attack, like we just figured out, and it does actually start to bleed into the 1,200 on your elemental mastery. Now, there's one interesting thing that we still do need to explore, because if we invested all in on attack versus all in on elemental mastery, it really depends on which reaction you are trying to go for there. Obviously, there's another avenue that we need to explore. And what if you invested a little bit in both? Okay, so here again, this is a small little program that I wrote. It's very, very simple. It's actually going to be kind of hard to see, unfortunately. So I'll zoom in on this in post. But here we have attack versus elemental mastery. And essentially what we're looking at here is we have a horizontal scroll bar, and what this scroll bar does is it controls how much of our attack is invested versus how much of our elemental mastery. Now, the methodology that I'm using here is essentially, if we invest 100% of our efforts into attack, we should end up getting roughly 5,000 attack and 0 elemental mastery. Versus if we spent 100% of our effort investing in elemental mastery, we should end up with 1,200, please forgive the rounding, 1,200 elemental mastery and 0 attack, okay? So the whole methodology here is probably not perfect, but it's at least going to give us a good idea of where to start investing our time. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in level 90 because it's kind of what we're shooting for. If you wanted to, we could go with level 60 or whatever you wanted to. And then crit damage is just because we have to have a crit damage to see these amplified strong crits and weak crits, just because it works off of your crit damage. What we're going to do here is the idea was I sat here and I flipped through a ton of numbers. Now, if you'll notice, if we actually start on the attack side, this is pretty easy to visualize. Watch this amplified strong crit right here. All we're going to do is we're going to start just decreasing our attack and increasing our elemental mastery. And you'll notice that slowly that amplified strong crit goes up. Now it's going up at a weird rate. It kind of goes up and jumps like in spurts, and then it falls down. So there is going to be a ratio that we're going to have to find here that works out. Now, what I did is I quickly just sifted through all of these numbers and tried to find out where the maximum amount of damage is that we should expect. So if we actually go back here, we can end up finding a couple of instances like this one, where we have 3,981 attack and 245 elements of mastery, and that ends up giving us 7,600 on our damage for the amplified melt or vaporize, whichever one you're going with. Now, of course, if you had a bunch more crit damage, it would, of course, go up and stuff like that, but that's neither here nor there. So what we end up finding is about 3,981 attack and 245 on the elemental mastery. So essentially, if we invest about 80% of the total attack that's possible and about 20% of the elemental mastery that's total possible, we end up getting right around that sweet spot where the amplified strong crit damage is the highest that it could be. And you'll notice that if we kind of play around with some of these things, you may end up seeing, 7,600 again here. So it's a balancing act of these two numbers, which is the important part here. It's not that investing in one of them completely is going to yield you the highest result. It needs to be a mixture of the two. So what we can end up doing is taking these two numbers and figuring out how much elemental mastery has gone in to this attack to figure out exactly what we need to invest in. I ended up using 3,981 attack and 245 elemental mastery, which ends up meaning that we roughly need about 6.1% of the elemental mastery that we have in our attack. So if you go back to your spreadsheet here, we actually have a sheet that is literally dedicated to this exact calculation. All of these numbers are 6% elemental mastery versus the total amount of attack that we are investing. So if you look here, for every 100 attack, you literally have 6 elemental mastery on your character. So if we actually take a gander all the way down to level 90 here, you can see if it was possible to hit 5,000 attack with 300 elemental mastery, you would be in the absolute best possible situation, and you would do about 10,000 damage on melt critting alone, which is pretty nice. Something to keep in mind here is that it's a little misleading that this crit number is what I kind of was focusing on so much in all of the calculations up until this point, because the crit is going to kind of mislead you. What you should really be focusing on is the melt and the vaporize, whether it's weak or strong. Whatever your team composition is would make sense, whether you're doing weak applications or strong applications. Obviously, you would want to go with strong if you have the characters built to do that, but sometimes, it makes more sense to do weak. Ganyu is one of those that she can spout out a ton of melt damage. Even though it's weak melt damage, it still outputs a ton of damage. Either way, the crits, the reason that Mona can hit so insanely high numbers is because she stacks a ton of attack and a ton of elemental mastery and a ton of crit damage. Like, that's what really makes her hit those insanely high numbers. And what we're trying to do is make this as strong as possible. These two scenarios right here are what we really want to do. If Mona didn't have a really high base damage for the strong or weak application of melt or vaporize, she wouldn't be able to crit for, whatever their crit damage is, 200% or whatever, and do those insanely high damage numbers. She needs to be able to have a high base application before the crit comes in so that she can hit those stupidly high numbers. After looking at all of these numbers, we can quickly rule out that the way that we should build the character, if you're going for an amplified reaction build, which most of the in-game content relies on either melt or doing some kind of high amplified damage to clear it relatively easy. Because of the way all of the damage scales in this game, it makes a lot of sense that if you want to see huge numbers, if you want to see big outputs of damage, if you want to clear content easier, then you need to start investing in a melt or vaporize comp. Now, I don't think that that is the only in-game strategy. I do think that I'm going to do a video about a team that I've been, kind of cooking up a little bit. It's quite a fun team. It's only 4 stars actually, and it's really, really fun to play. And it's really, really focused on reactions. It's not a whole lot of anything other than reactions, and it literally demolishes certain abyss floors. But anyways, if you're just going for straight up transformative reactions like overload, shattered, and stuff like that, don't worry too much about your attack. Whoever's going to be actually triggering those reactions just needs to have a ton of elemental mastery. Simple as that. But if you're going for the melt vaporized kind of thing, then you definitely want to have a situation where you have some attacks, some elemental mastery. My personal recommendation as of this recording, you would want to have about 6% of your attack invested into elemental mastery as well. For every 100 attack that you have, just have 6 elemental mastery. That is going to end up netting you a ton of base damage for that reaction. And then whatever crit stats you have after that, Mona could hit probably she could hit more than 120, 150, 109,000. I don't know how much damage she hits. I don't have Mona. But she could probably actually min-max her damage a little bit better if she had about 6% of her attack invested in her elemental mastery. Just saying. Why should you even worry about adding attack? Well, everything that happens in this game is all of the numbers derive from attack in some way. Literally everything derives from attack, except for reactions. And that's why elemental mastery is a thing. Reactions are free damage. That's why you want to add in elemental mastery. They are so free. Just for having different elements on the same team, you are getting reactions baked into your team. And if you're not using those reactions, then I think you're leaving a lot to be desired in your damage. I really do. But guys, I have been rambling. I have spent like a week, if not a week and a half, if not the last month of my life, basically leading up to this point. This is my magnum opus. So I'm not posting videos every day anymore, and I'm terrified. I am legit terrified that this isn't going to, I just feel like I don't accomplish anything if I don't post a video. But this has kind of been like, I have literally prevented myself from doing anything else before I get this video out. So after this video goes live, I really hope that you guys get something out of this video, because it has literally been destroying my brain for the last week, month, whatever. And I'm ready to move on from this topic. I am, because I do think I have satisfied my own curiosity with the topic. I hope that if you are still feeling curious, you will drop a comment down in the description. I hope you will drop a comment down below. I will try my best to answer it. There's a ton of stuff I'm going to leave in the description for you guys to pick through. I'm going to leave my damage calculator spreadsheet, which has all of the numbers that we've referenced today. If you are interested, I will leave this second spreadsheet, which is basically what happens if you build not only attack, but elemental mastery. Some of these numbers are super unrealistic, like 5,000 attack and 1,200 elemental mastery. Of course, that's going to be an insanely huge number, but I don't think you'll ever hit 5,000 attack and 1,200 elemental mastery at this current stage in the game, which is 1.3, by the way. So some of these numbers are super unrealistic, but I think that it deserves a gander if you are at all curious at what ratios you would want to be running between your attack and your elemental mastery. You can kind of see, you could literally go to your level, like let's say, my Ganyu is level 80. I can go to level 80 and her attack is, I don't know, like 1,600. I don't know what her freaking attack is. Her attack's 1,500 and her elemental mastery is probably like a 90. It's really, really poorly invested. If I invested another 50 elemental mastery, how much my damage would increase for each of these reactions. So you can kind of pick through this if you want to. I'll leave a link to the damage calculator down below because it is an amazing resource. I haven't quite figured out everything about this yet, but there is a way that you can optimize your weapons. You tell it what you want to optimize for. Like, I want to optimize for electrocharge damage, optimize the weapon. It gives you like sacrificial fragments is probably going to be your best bet at level 90, blah, blah, blah. It gives you like a ton of good stuff. Like it's good, boys. It's good. Go check it out. Also leave a link to the wiki page that goes over all of the calculations for how to arrive at all of these damage calculations numbers. If it's easier for you to understand that way, you can do it that way. Sometimes it's easier for me to just look at a formula. The way that I try to write my formulas is kind of the way that I just think about them logically, but you can pick through those. That's basically how they translate into Google Sheets. If there's demand enough, I guess I could leave this stuff in there as well. If you guys really want that, you can let me know. But otherwise, that's pretty much all I've got for today, guys. This, again, has been a huge journey. I'm pretty satisfied. I do feel like I now know that 6% is kind of my, like, sweet spot for a lot of things when it comes to elemental mastery. When I'm building a character, I now know that, like, hey, 6% for every 100, I need 6 elemental mastery. So I have 1700. So 17 times 6 would be what? I should have roughly around 104 elemental mastery. So the sweet spot is basically what I'm doing here is I'm missing out on extra melt damage because I don't have enough attack to satisfy the elemental mastery bonus that it's giving me. So I should invest in a little bit more attack on Ganyu. And the way that I would do that is sacrifice a little bit of my, elemental mastery wherever it is. If it's, on this piece, if I find another feather that has, a little bit less of this, a little bit more flat attack, however you want to do it, you kind of have to, find that golden ratio that works for you. But anyways, I'm going to stop rambling. It's been a while since I've recorded a video and I'm just excited to talk to you guys. How you guys doing? I hope you guys are doing well. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something out of this video. Remember that knowledge is power. If you have anything to contribute to the topic, please drop it down in the comments below. I will be happy to read through them and kind of try to apply this stuff to my own research because just trying to learn more. Anyways, I'm going to do a team video next because I'm tired of talking about complicated stuff. So, see you guys. Major shout out to Cherry Blue, who is a YouTube member.